Welcome to the Energetics of Being podcast, a podcast that delves into the fascinating world of human design and unravels the layers of conditioning beliefs and expectations that can influence who we become and how we show up in our lives. I'm your host, Sarah Atkins, and I'm really excited to share this journey with you. We'll explore topics such as human design, gene keys, astrology, holistic approaches, coaching, neuroscience, and psychology. We're going to draw from a rich tapestry of wisdom to help you navigate your own personal journey of self-discovery. So whether you are new to human design or have been on a path of self-discovery for years, this podcast is for you. This is your invitation to step into your power, embrace your uniqueness, and create a life that resonates with your soul's deepest desires. So, if you're ready to dive in, let's go. Today, we've got something a little bit different. I'm Sarah Atkins, and I'm joined by the lovely and wonderful Cassie Footman. And we have put together a little podcast series, video series, whatever you want to call it, for Neurodiversity Celebration Week. This week, 17th of March to the 23rd of March in 2025. If you are listening not in real time, that's when these episodes are available. And we thought we would just have some informal chats, I suppose, and just share some of our expertise, some of our real life lived experience, as well as professional experience, because together we bring a wealth of knowledge in the space of understanding people, especially neurodivergent brains. So just to kind of give a bit of background for me, for those of you that might not know me or might not have heard of me before, I'm a neurodiversity specialist coach accredited with the ICF. I am an ex-teacher. I did have a special interest in special educational needs, and I'm also a parent carer of 3 neurodivergent boys. So I kind of bring together all of that wealth of lived experience and real experience. I am also neurodivergent myself, so I have my own experiences to bring to the table as well. And then we have Cassie.
And so thank you, Sarah. Do you know, before I introduce myself, I just really want to say how excited I am that we are creating this together because, you know, particularly during Neurodiversity Celebration Week, we've had so many incredible conversations over the time that we've known each other, you know, that have touched on this subject and many other subjects as well that are all interconnected. And I just think it's really brilliant that actually now we're going to start sharing some of that and our thoughts and our insights and our own learning from our personal experience, as well as that through the people that we've worked with and supported as well.
Yeah.
My background, my profession, I guess if I could just kind of work back, is within human resources. I've worked in HR for, well over 18 years in all sorts of different roles. But essentially what I've always enjoyed is creating strategy with businesses to really enable people to work at their very best, and for the businesses and leaders to create the best environments to enable their people to be at their very best. And then my work spanned out and I became a coach, a business coach, a life coach. And my work has spread out in many different ways, but ultimately the core is really helping people to play to their strengths and bring that into the workplace and live a happy life. With regards to neurodivergence, I myself am neurodivergent. That was a late, I guess, understanding for me. That the pennies kind of dropped and I got a lot of understanding. And that came about through one of my children actually also finding out for themselves that they're neurodivergent. And looking back, I think the majority of my clients that I work with naturally also have kind of fit into neurodivergence as well. So clearly that's why we ended up working together.
Yeah. I know, it's hilarious though, isn't it? Because even though I call myself a neurodiversity specialist coach now, it took me a really long time to outwardly say that that's an area that I specialize in, because I never felt like I knew enough, like what was my credentials, like what was my knowledge. And like you, late to diagnosis. So I only got my formal diagnosis this year, so at the grand old age of 46. Been on the journey personally, probably for the last 10 years through my boys, and knowing that I understood what they were experiencing. I understand them at a whole other level. But I noticed it when I was teaching as well, that I had this uncanny ability to pick out and see what the struggles were. So that's when I started working on special educational interventions, I suppose, looking at strategies to help my students perform better, to help them manage revision or exams, and just really getting to understand the individual and what their needs and strengths were, and playing to those things rather than doing things in a conventional way. And I know that we're going to touch on this at some point, but it took me a really long time to own the level of expertise and understanding that I have myself, and realizing that not everybody has it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think when it's your own reality, you don't know what you don't know. That's why I'm so late to diagnosis, because, when you live it, you don't realize it's not how everybody else thinks or feels or behaves, right?
Absolutely. It kind of becomes your normal. It's your normal. It's what you're used to.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I can certainly relate to that.
I remember when I met my husband and we were sort of first going out, and you start getting to know each other, and he'd be like, "What are you thinking?" And I'd come out with this like tirade of this stream of thought. And he was like, "There's no way that goes on in your head." I'm like, constant. And he's like, "But that's just exhausting. How can one person think that much in such a short space of time?" I was like, "Well, doesn't everybody do that? No?" And he's like,
How could one not?
just hilarious. And I remember we had a conversation of, "Yeah, but do you not have that chatter, like the voice, those voices, like," and you see the look on other people's faces, you're like, "You hear voices?" I'm like, oh, you don't hear voices. Do you know? Imagine my surprise when I find out that not everybody has an internal dialogue constantly.
Yeah, I must admit, I think that was something that I was really surprised about, and it still makes me giggle because I find it fascinating. I laugh at myself, and I think this
Yeah.
is where, you can create lightness here with it all, is that I really laugh at myself sometimes. It's like, what? You say what in your head?
Yeah.
It's like this outward giggle will come out and somebody says, "You're all right." I said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. I'm having a wonderful time up here."
But this is why we wanted to talk about this in particular, because one of the conversations that we've had, and I've had recently with another amazing neurodivergent human being, is that we don't buy into this narrative around, neurodivergence is your superpower, like you're so lucky. And I understand that the need for people to want to be positive about it and to be accepting about it. And I get that and I appreciate that. However, it can feel quite dismissive as to like, "Oh, well, it's not really a problem, is it? It's a superpower, you're fine." And it completely almost eradicates the real struggle, because there are real challenges and real struggles, right?
Oh my goodness me. There are huge struggles, huge challenges. And I think when I started to wonder about myself, whether I was neurodivergent, it was the struggles I was experiencing that were, it was like this push, pull, tug of war all the time. Yes, there were parts of me that, were amazing, but actually they were overshadowed by all the struggles that I had.
Yeah.
And I was finding it increasingly frustrating. And then when I got to understand more about neurodivergence and perhaps how, my struggles have potentially been brought about through my neurodivergence, it was like the penny dropping. It's like, my goodness me.
Yeah.
It's not me. I'm not stupid. But that And that really helped, but it didn't take away the struggle. The struggle is still there. Yes, the great aspects are still there as well, but the struggle is still there. And for me, it's been very much about understanding and appreciating and having compassion for myself around that has been wonderful.
One of the things that, in terms of challenge, that as you were talking, I was reflecting on, because it's like, how far back do these challenges go? So I remember when you fill out your, assessment criteria or your diagnosis, they get you to do lots of questionnaires and lots of self-reflection and da, da, da. And it's funny because you forget so much. And there's definitely been periods in my life that I've gone in terms of reflecting back, and I'm like, oh, that was a sign. That was a sign. And obviously I never knew. So I can think about the first time I properly had a breakdown, I guess, for want of a better description, burnout, whatever you want to call it. I experienced my first panic attack, and it was when I left university. And I'd taken on a part-time job just while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But it was like leaving university, having been in education all the way through until the age of 22, 23, there was a structure. There was a structure to everything. Albeit, there was also deadlines for things. I'm a deadline dancer. I will always do things at the last second, despite my best efforts. I always go in with something with a really good intention. But almost the longer the deadline is, the worse it'll be. But anyway, that's another story. At the same time, having those deadlines, even though I am a deadline dancer, it still created structure. There was always something to work towards. There was a framework. I was independent, obviously, because I was living on my own, or like in a student house. And I had 2 part-time jobs while I was studying, but there was always structure. When I left university, I would say that's probably the first time that the wheels fell off, because all of a sudden I was like, I have no idea where I'm going, what I'm doing. And I see it now because my son has had the similar thing, and he's still in education. But it all created almost like this catastrophic existential crisis of, who am I? What am I doing? There was no anchor point. And I had never realised how important back then an anchor point is for me. And obviously what I now understand in terms of neurodivergence, particularly with my autistic clients, I would say, or ADHDers, which is what I am. And we need some kind of anchor point, some stability, whether that's a person, a place, a framework, a structure of some kind. There needs to be some kind of stability. And when there is nothing there, it can feel literally like you're falling out of an aeroplane and you don't know where you're going to stop. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Yeah, it certainly resonates. And it also, part of it doesn't. And let me explain that. So I get, and yeah, absolutely, structure. I need structure, but too much structure
Yeah.
is not good for me at all. Like, yeah, it's too much structure can bring out the worst in me.
Yeah.
So it's almost like needing the structure that's almost like a framework, so maybe the anchor, but it cannot be prescriptive. I need freedom. So for me, I've learned that having structure creates freedom for me. And the structure may be as much as, I'm in point A now and I need a point B that I'm striving towards. And if I don't, when I meet that point B, if I don't have that point B, then becomes my point A, the where I am now.
Yeah.
And then I can do new point B. So there always needs to be something there for me. And what I found is the times when I've left my point A and I've achieved my point B, being a high achiever, kind of person. I've achieved point B. It's like then don't have something else to strive for. I'll often crash. And it's like a paradigm crash.
Yes.
Like a complete depression. It would be a loss. I'd achieve something great, but then there'd be a loss because that isn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The striving and the driving towards it isn't there. So does that make any sense whatsoever?
It made complete sense to me. And I think maybe we are talking about a very similar thing. And also to acknowledge what you're saying in the fact that actually neurodivergence is such a broad umbrella. And just because what works for one person works for that person doesn't mean it's going to work for the next person. So I think when you are a business leader, or if you are a team leader in any kind of way, like whether you're in corporate, whether you run your own business, it doesn't really matter. One size does not fit all. That's the key thing when we're talking about neurodivergence. I've worked for organisations and I've worked within organisations where neurodivergence is very buzzwordy, isn't it, right now? There seems to be, and this is massively my perception, so I apologise if people disagree, but this is just my perception. We have some organisations and some individuals who are approaching it as a individual, let's see what you need. Let's, see if we can meet those needs and let's see what we can do to work together. It's a collaborative approach. And then you've got other organisations who love talking good talk. And it's like, well, we've got a tick list. We've done all the things that we need to do. And they talk a good talk, but actually when it comes to the reality, it's too hard. Right? That, okay, you need point, like you must make chicken point, like this is the rate. Find your own way. That's what the outcome is. So it's very task driven, task orientated, which generally speaking is quite an ADHD type focus. Mm-hmm. Whereas a more of an autistic characteristic is wanting structure. They need to know what to expect, what the expectations are, what the processes are, but also knowing that if they see a better way, that you're open to adapting that process to get to the right outcome. So it's having a bit of structure and a bit of framework again, but it's slightly different. And then for people like me who are ADHD, who have those two, it's like having two separate people inside your head arguing, because I need a framework, I need an anchor point, but I also need freedom to explore. I need freedom to just test things out, to push boundaries, to have fun, to not be held back. So I want to know what the process is, but I don't necessarily want to use the process, which I realise is a complete contradiction in terms, which I guess maybe that's where the confusion comes with neurotypical people trying to understand what the needs are.
Yeah, definitely. And so what you just described there for yourself really does resonate massively. I think, yeah, it does. And, from my own experience of one working in, big businesses and, I guess also from my experience in HR as well, working with line managers and helping them to get the most out of their people. The number one thing I think that a lot of businesses, certainly the ones that I work with, so this is obviously restricted to my own experience and isn't reflective of every organisation, is that, managers and businesses don't tend to take the time and put the energy and effort into really understanding their people. They make so many assumptions about who they have and have very rigid structures. And I get and understand that organisations need structures in place, but they'll be very assumptive of the individuals that they have in place. And, it's a little bit like, do you remember as a child having one of those shape sorters that you've got the square, the circle, the star, the rectangle, and you had to put them in the right shaped holes? Well, I see corporate a little bit like assuming that everybody's a square. Push the square peg into whatever shaped hole, regardless of whether it fits or not. We'll push it, we'll pull it, will do everything to try and make it squeeze and fit. And it doesn't work, and actually if an organization was able to put a little bit of time, effort and energy, patience and compassion into really understanding what shapes they have in a team, understanding that, the star is really great at this, don't ask them to do that.
Yeah.
And they will be the square in the back, trying to get into the wrong shape hole, and you won't get the best out of them. And just understanding that different things, different tasks, different abilities, different environments, different situations can put somebody in flow or can take them out of flow. And this is regardless of the neurodivergence. And I really think that a lot of places overcomplicate it. But just simply understanding who you've got in your team, what their strengths are, where they can add the most value, giving people the room to contribute, having rules in place, as it were. This is the way we do things around here, but allowing people to flex it depending on their shape.
Yeah. Do you know what, though? This is where my brain went. You talk about the shape sorter. I remember it had a red half and a blue half and the yellow handles to pull it back. I was also the kid that would try or look at the shapes and go, I reckon if I move that at that angle, that will go through that hole. So again, I know what the framework is and I know what the shape is, but I'm going to test out something else and just see if that works. If it doesn't, that's cool. I'll go back to using the framework.
How wonderful if you're working in an environment that enabled that innovation.
Yeah.
Allowed that innovation for you to test out and try things in a different way, to experiment, to then learn that actually, yes, it does work. No, it doesn't work. But to make it okay, to maybe make a mistake, because, that's where there's going to be some gold coming out of that then intelligence can then be put into the next things. We don't know in advance that that's going to happen as a result of something.
No.
But we know if we allow that step and we give the confidence and the environment to allow people to test things out. But that takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of compassion. And it takes a lot of, I guess, open-mindedness.
Yeah. And this kind of comes onto the mission, the whole point of why we're doing this little series, because we wanted to, when we were talking, just the two of us, I loved what your mission was in the work that you do now. And it was, you probably say it better, but the overriding theme is that everyone deserves an opportunity to smile every day. That's the big takeaway that I got from that. And I'm sure we'll come back to that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important. It's incredibly important. There is so much talent in the world. And let's be honest, the world needs all the talent to come forward, to be embodied, to be owned.
Yes. And the creativity, that we need those people that want to look outside of the confines of what we do or the way things have always been done, because that's part of our evolution, right? As human beings, that's what got us here. Otherwise, we'd still be sitting inside caves, wearing bearskins or, whatever. It's that creative, out of the box thinking that moves us forward. So we should be embracing it rather than suppressing it.
Definitely, 100%. And I think the key thing for me that really excited me about having these conversations is what you shared about the Maori community and their approach and their view of neurodivergence from the autistic perspective and the ADHD, and how that was described. So share that so everybody can hear what that's about.
Okay, so I had a conversation with somebody from my husband's place of work, actually. Very inspiring guy. I'm actually going to do a talk with them for Neurodiversity Celebration Week this week as well. But he shared some wisdom, and I've kind of gone into this a bit deeper because it just blew my mind. And I was like, why can we not approach things in the same way? So the Maori word for disabled and I apologize for anybody who can speak Maori about my pronunciation, is waikaha, which means to have strength or to be differently able. So they don't have a word for disabled. They just term it as differently able, right? I then went a bit deeper into looking at the Maori terms for autism and ADHD. And the word for autism is takiwatanga, which literally means in his or her own time and space, which I just thought was beautiful, because what I know from not just myself and my family, but from a lot of my autistic clients, is that it's a processing challenge. They process information in a different way, and they just need time and space to process, understand, and make sense of things. And actually, if you just give them time and space, things are a bit happier in the household. So, for example, how that translates in real life, when I was parenting a child and he didn't want to transition out of the park into going home, I now know that if I manage that transition by giving him like a 15-minute warning, then a 10-minute warning, and then a 5-minute warning, not in a hard way, but just like 5 minutes, or, those transitions are a lot smoother, because you're not expecting them to do something straight away. They just need a bit of transition time. And actually, from a neuroscientific point of view, our brain needs up to 15 minutes to transition from one task into the next. So it's not a big deal. It doesn't have to be difficult. Some people need longer to transition than others, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, and I've definitely been guilty of this, holding up that badge of I can multitask. That's my ADHD side. I can spin plates. I can multitask. Yes, I can, but I can't sustain it. And if I am managing more than one task, can I guarantee that they will be done in the highest standard possible? Probably not, because I'm not paying my full attention to it. Which then leads me on to the Maori word for ADHD, which again, they don't have a direct translation, but they refer to it as aurora retini, which means attention goes to many places. And I just love it. It's such a nicer term. It's a nicer way of framing something that in our language and in our world has very negative connotations, I think. And it's just a much more beautiful way of approaching it.
It absolutely is. And for me, it just brought an understanding. It brought a compassionate stance to it.
Yeah.
Because the words that we use in the English language that describes much of neurodiversity, it has the word dis in it.
Yeah. Disorder, deficit. It's also disempowering, right?
Massively. And disenabling.
Yeah.
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 And I really loved what you shared about the Maori perspective on those words. They're so open.
Yeah.
They're accepting
Yes.
that we're not all the same shape, size, colour, blend, taste, smell, whatever. Yeah. We're also unique, and be celebrated for that, and to have the same opportunity regardless of our uniqueness. It's just very welcoming and very compassionate, very open and very loving.
I completely agree with everything you've just said, but I think it's also valuing what you bring rather than what you don't. Do you know what I mean? Rather than pointing out everything that you don't bring, it's shifting the focus on what you do bring, which again, we've almost kind of gone full circle. I know we're going to cover this in another chat, but I don't buy into it as a superpower because it's very dismissive of the challenge. However, we don't need to labour the point on the challenge. We need to lean more into what we do bring, what we are capable of, and coming up with strategies and solutions for what we struggle with.
Yeah, definitely. What puts you in flow? When are you at your best?
Yeah.
What takes you out of flow? How not to get the best out of you? How not to communicate with you? I think when somebody really, truly understands how to bring out the best in somebody and, bringing it into the simplest thing like you did, talking about your child and managing transitions. I mean, transitions in itself is a huge subject, particularly in the workplace. Transitions from one work stream to another work stream, managing a transition in a promotion from being a member of a team to all of a sudden managing the team. They are huge. And if they're ignored and they're not managed and respected and guided and supported, then things really can go wrong and people can really not feel valued very, very quickly.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think we'll leave it there for this chat and then we'll carry on in the next one.
I look forward to it.
Thanks, Cassie. I hope you found our exploration today both insightful and inspiring. And if you resonated with what you heard today, I invite you to subscribe, rate and review this podcast on your preferred platform, whatever that might be. Your feedback is really invaluable and it helps us to reach even more listeners on their own journey of self-discovery. And remember, a conversation doesn't have to end here. You can connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram under the handle @sarah.m.atkins, or you can find me on Facebook just as Sarah Atkins. I would really love to hear from you and continue our conversation there. I am on a personal mission to bring you thought-provoking conversations and practical insights to help you break free from the conditioning that holds you back. And as we close out this episode, take a moment to reflect on what you've learned today. How can you apply these insights to your own life? What steps can you take to further align with your own authentic self? Thank you again for listening. I really do appreciate you choosing to spend some time with me. And until next time, stay curious, stay authentic, and stay true to you.